I arrived at the main gate of the estate exactly at 4 in the afternoon on December 24th. I had spent 3 whole weeks preparing every detail of this Christmas. 3 weeks buying gifts, one by one. 3 weeks cooking and freezing my children's favorite meals. 3 weeks imagining their faces when they saw everything I had prepared for them. 3 weeks believing that this time would be different, that this time they would see me, that this time they would want me close. But when I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, I felt something strange in the air. A heavy silence, a stillness that wasn't normal. The iron gates were closed. Not just closed, locked with thick chains and brand new padlocks. Padlocks I had never seen before. Padlocks that gleamed under the afternoon sun as if someone had bought them that very morning. I approached slowly. My hands were shaking. Not from the cold. They were shaking because something inside me already knew what I was going to find. But my mind still refused to believe it. It was still looking for explanations. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they forgot to tell me they were changing the locks. Maybe Caroline had a surprise and wanted me to enter from the other side. Then I saw the paper. A white piece of paper folded in half. It was tucked between the bars of the gate, taped up. Like it was just some random notice. Like it was trash. I took it carefully. My fingers left marks on the paper because they were damp. I hadn't realized I was sweating. I unfolded the note and read the words written in my daughter Caroline's handwriting. Go home. We don't want you here. 7 words. Just 7 words. But each one was a knife. Each one was a closed door. Each one was a year of my life thrown into the garbage. I read the note once, twice, 3 times. As if the words were going to change. As if my brain were going to find another meaning hidden between the letters. But no, it was clear. It was direct. It was cruel. I stood there in front of the gate, not knowing what to do. The paper was still in my hand. The wind fluttered it slightly. I could hear music inside. Laughter. Happy voices. My grandchildren screaming with excitement. The sound of plates clinking. The sound of a family celebrating. The sound of my family celebrating. Without me. I walked to the side of the gate where the fence has wider gaps. From there, I could see part of the yard. I could see the tables I had ordered to be set up myself last week. The tables were full of food. Food I didn't prepare, decorations I didn't put up, lights I didn't hang, and in the middle of all that, there they were. All of them. Caroline was wearing a red dress. That dress I gave her last year that she told me she didn't like. She was laughing. Laughing with that loud laugh she has when she is truly happy. My son, Christopher, was by her side with a beer in his hand. He was talking to someone I couldn't see clearly. My grandchildren were running through the yard, chasing each other between the trees. The same trees I planted 20 years ago when I bought this property. The trees I watered every week. The trees I cared for, as if they were my children. And everyone was there. Everyone except me. The one who paid for this estate, the one who maintained it, the one who invited everyone, the one who had been preparing this reunion for a month. Ever since Caroline called me and told me that this year would be special, that she wanted us all to be together, that she missed me, that the kids missed me, that it was important to her that I be there. Lies. It was all lies. I stood watching through the bars like a stranger, like someone watching another person's life. And in that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't a sharp pain. It wasn't a scream. It was something worse. It was the sound of something being extinguished, like when a candle runs out of air and the flame simply disappears. That is how it felt, as if something in my chest had gone out forever. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't bang on the gate. I didn't do anything they probably expected me to do. I stayed still, silent. Watching them. And while I watched them, a thought crossed my mind. A thought that came from somewhere deep. From somewhere cold and dark that I didn't know existed inside me. They don't know that I already knew this was going to happen. They don't know that I found the text messages 2 weeks ago. They don't know that I heard the call Caroline made to her brother. They don't know that I saw the papers hidden in her purse. They don't know anything, and I am not going to tell them anything. Not yet. I folded the paper carefully. I put it in my purse. I took a step back, 2 steps. 3. My legs moved on their own. My body knew it had to get away from there. That standing in front of that closed gate wasn't going to change anything. But my heart still wanted to stay. It still wanted to scream. It still wanted them to see me, to let me in, to ask for my forgiveness. But my heart wasn't in charge anymore. No more. I walked back to the car slowly. I opened the door. I sat down. I closed the door. I put my hands on the steering wheel. And I stayed there, looking at the gate, listening to the laughter coming from inside, laughter that before would have destroyed me, but now it only confirmed what I already knew. That to them, I no longer existed. That I was a burden. That I was the past. That I was the old woman who was no longer useful. The mother who had already fulfilled her function. The grandmother who had already given everything she had to give. And now that there was nothing left to take from me, they could toss me out like you toss out an old piece of furniture. But they made a mistake. A big mistake. They thought I was weak. They thought I was going to drive away crying. They thought I was going to stay silent. They thought I was going to accept this without saying a word. They thought they could do this to me and get away with it. And maybe a month ago, they would have been right. A month ago, I would have cried all night. I would have called Caroline begging for an explanation. I would have knocked on every door looking for someone to tell me it was all a misunderstanding. I would have carried that guilt for the rest of my life, wondering what I did wrong, where I failed as a mother. But 2 weeks ago, everything changed. 2 weeks ago, I discovered the truth, and the truth didn't destroy me. It woke me up. I started the car. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I turned on the music. An old song I used to listen to when I was 20. When I wasn't a mother yet. When I hadn't yet sacrificed every part of myself for people who were never going to value it. I turned up the volume. And as I drove back to the city, I could only think one thing. They are going to regret this. Not because I'm going to scream at them. Not because I'm going to make a scene. Not because I'm going to beg them. They are going to regret it because they are going to discover who I really am. They are going to discover that the quiet woman they ignored all these years was paying attention to everything. They are going to discover that I have a memory, that I have proof, that I have a plan. And when the moment comes, I won't tremble, I won't hesitate. I'm going to do what I have to do. And they will understand that closing that gate was the biggest mistake of their lives. Because I am no longer the Eleanor who begged for love. I am no longer the Eleanor who settled for crumbs. I am no longer the Eleanor who accepted anything just to not be alone. Now I am someone else. And that Eleanor does not forgive. That Eleanor does not forget. That Eleanor collects her debts. I drove for 40 minutes without really seeing the highway. My eyes were open, but my mind was somewhere else. In another time, remembering how we got here, trying to find the exact moment when everything broke. The moment I stopped being their mother and became their enemy. Maybe it was 6 months ago. When Caroline came to visit me at my apartment in the city, she arrived without warning. She knocked on the door on a Tuesday afternoon. I was getting ready. It surprised me to see her because she almost never came without me inviting her first. She always had excuses. She was always busy. There was always something more important than coming to see her mother. But that day, she arrived smiling. She hugged me. She told me she missed me, that she had been thinking about me a lot, that she wanted to spend time with me. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and served her tea in the cups I had bought, especially because I knew she liked them. The cups with hand-painted flowers. The cups that cost $50 each, but I bought them anyway because I wanted her to feel special in my home. We talked about unimportant things for half an hour. About the weather, about her kids, about her job. And I was happy. Happy to have her there. Happy to hear her voice. Happy to feel that maybe our relationship was improving. That maybe after so many years of distance, we were finally going to be close again. Then she changed the subject. She asked me about the estate. She asked me if I still went often. I told her yes. That I went every weekend to check that everything was okay, to water the plants. To keep the house clean. It was my favorite place in the world. The only place where I felt truly at peace. Caroline nodded. She took a sip of tea. And then she told me something that I should have heard as an alarm. She told me that it was a lot of work for a woman of my age, that the estate was very big, that I didn't have the energy I used to, that I should think about selling it, or better yet, that I should think about transferring the deed to her name so she could take care of everything, so I wouldn't have to worry anymore. She said it with that soft voice she uses when she wants to convince me of something, that good girl voice, that voice she learned to use since she was little to get what she wanted, and I almost fell for it. I almost told her yes. I almost signed the papers that she surely already had prepared in her purse. But something stopped me. A tiny little voice in my head that told me to wait, to think it through, to not make hasty decisions. So I smiled at her and told her I would think about it, that I needed time, that there was no rush. I saw how her face changed, just for a second. It was so fast I almost missed it, but I saw it. I saw the frustration. I saw the anger. I saw the mask slip for an instant before she put the smile back on. And in that moment, something inside me woke up. A suspicion, a doubt, a question I didn't dare ask out loud. Caroline left half an hour later. She hugged me at the door. She told me to call her if I needed anything. She told me she loved me. But as I watched her walk down the hallway, I felt something cold in my stomach. Something telling me that visit hadn't been casual, that tea hadn't been for love, that those sweet words were hiding something else. And I was right. 2 weeks later, I went to the estate as I always did on weekends. I arrived Friday night. The house was as I had left it, clean, tidy, silent. I made myself something to eat. I watched television for a while, and I went to sleep early because I was tired from the drive. The next day I got up with the Sunday I made coffee. I went out to the garden to check the plants. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed perfect until I decided to go into the office, that small room on the second floor where I kept all my important documents, my property deeds, my bank accounts, my will. The door was closed as always, but when I entered, I noticed something strange. The desk drawers weren't exactly how I had left them. Someone had been there. Someone had moved my things. Someone had gone through my papers. I sat in the chair with my heart pounding in my chest. I checked every drawer. I checked every folder. And then I saw it. A folder I didn't recognize. A new folder with papers I had never seen. Legal documents, contracts, property transfer forms. Everything prepared. Everything ready to be signed. Only my signature was missing. And the name that appeared as the new owner was Caroline Vance. My hands started to shake while I read the papers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own daughter had broken into my house. She had gone through my things. She had prepared fake documents to steal my property. And the worst of it is that she had done it with such confidence, with such assurance. As if I were so stupid that I wouldn't realize. I sat in that chair for 2 hours, the papers in my hands, the tears running down my face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of humiliation, of betrayal. Because it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the property. It was about the fact that my daughter saw me as an obstacle, as something she had to remove to get what she wanted. And then I remembered other things. Things I hadn't wanted to see before. Like that time 3 months ago when Christopher asked me how much money I had saved. Like that time 2 months ago when Caroline suggested I make a new will because the old one was outdated. Like that time last month when the two of them arrived together at my apartment and asked me if I had thought about moving to an assisted living facility, that it would be more comfortable for me, that I would have company, that they would visit me often. Lies, all lies. They didn't want me to be comfortable. They wanted me out of the way. They wanted me to sign papers. They wanted me to give them everything without a fight. And when they saw that I wasn't that easy to convince, they decided to take another route. They decided to do it in secret. They decided to rob me. I put the fake papers in my purse. I locked the office. And that night, while I drove back to the city, I made a decision. I wasn't going to say anything to them. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fight for crumbs of love they were never going to give me. Instead of that, I was going to do something different. I was going to watch. I was going to wait. I was going to gather evidence. And when I had everything ready, I was going to show them who Eleanor Vance really was. The next 2 months were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was fine. I had to smile when Caroline called me. I had to accept their invitations to lunch. I had to listen to their lies without saying anything. I had to see my grandchildren knowing that their parents were teaching them that it's okay to use people, that it's okay to lie, that it's okay to steal if it's from someone old who doesn't matter anymore. But while I pretended to be fine, I was working. I hired a lawyer. I showed him the fake documents. I explained the situation. He helped me protect my properties, to change wills, to create trusts that Caroline could never break. He told me that what she had done was fraud, that I could report her, but I asked him to wait, that it wasn't time yet. I also hired a private investigator, a serious man in his 50s who promised absolute discretion. I gave him $2,000 up front and asked him to follow Caroline, to check her movements, to find out who she was talking to discover if there were more people involved in her plan. And what he discovered broke my heart completely. Because it wasn't just Caroline. It was Christopher too, and Christopher's wife, and Caroline's husband. Everyone was in on this together. Everyone had planned how to take my properties from me, how to declare me mentally incompetent, how to convince a judge that I could no longer make decisions for myself, how to keep everything I had worked for 40 years. The investigator handed me recordings, photographs, text messages, emails, everything documented, everything saved, everything ready to be used when I decided it was time. And that moment was getting closer and closer. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything changed forever, when there was no turning back, when I stopped being the mother who forgives and became the woman who collects. I was in my apartment preparing dinner. I had made roast chicken with potatoes, the same dish I made when my children were small and that they always liked. How ironic I was. Still cooking their favorite meals, still thinking about them, still wanting to please them, despite everything I already knew. The phone rang while I was taking the tray out of the oven. It was Caroline. I answered like I always did, with that soft voice, with that attitude of an available mother, with that mask I had learned to wear so well over the last few weeks. She sounded happy. She told me she wanted to invite me to dinner on Friday, that it had been a long time since we spent time together, just the two of us, that she missed our conversations. I told her yes, that I would love that I missed her too. Lies. I had learned to lie too. We hung up after a few minutes. I left the phone on the table, and I stood there looking at the food I had prepared. That chicken no one was going to eat. Those potatoes that were going to get cold alone. And I realized something. I realized that I was still living in the past. I was still cooking for ghosts. I was still waiting for the family I remembered to exist again. But that family never existed. That family was a lie I had told myself so I wouldn't see the truth. The truth that my children never truly loved me. They needed me. They used me. They squeezed me until there was nothing left. And now that only a tired old woman remained, they wanted to get rid of me. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything, about every sacrifice, about every night I stayed awake taking care of them when they were sick, about every dollar I spent on their education while I wore the same clothes for years, about every dream I buried so they could fulfill theirs. And now they paid me with betrayal, with lies, with fake documents hidden in my own house, with plans to declare me crazy, with a Christmas where they slammed the doors in my face. At 3 a.m, I got up. I turned on the living room light. I took out all the documents I had been saving, the fake papers I found at the estate, the copies my lawyer had made, the private investigator's reports, the photographs, the recordings. Everything was there. All the truth organized in folders on my table. And as I looked at that evidence, I made a final decision. A decision that had no turning back. I was going to let them continue with their plan. I was going to let them believe they had won. I was going to pretend I didn't know anything until the perfect moment. And then I was going to show them everything. I was going to destroy their lives like they had destroyed mine. On Friday, I arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes early. Caroline was already there, sitting at a table in the back. She was wearing a cashmere sweater I had given her last year. She had her hair pulled back. She looked pretty. She looked like my little girl. And for a second, my weak heart wanted to believe that maybe it was all a misunderstanding, that maybe there was an explanation, that maybe we could still fix this. But then she saw me and smiled. And that smile reminded me of everything. That fake smile. That smile she had perfected over years. That smile she used when she wanted something from me. I sat across from her. We ordered food. We talked about unimportant things. She asked me how I was. I told her I was fine. She asked me about the estate. I told her everything was perfect. She asked me if I had thought about her suggestion from a few months ago, the suggestion to transfer the property to her. And there it was. The true motive for the dinner. It wasn't because she missed me. It wasn't because she wanted to spend time with me. It was because she needed to pressure me one more time. Because her plan wasn't advancing like she wanted. Because I wasn't being the easy-to-manipulate old woman she expected. I smiled at her. I told her that yes, I had thought about that maybe she was right, that maybe it was too much work for me. I saw her eyes light up. I saw her lean forward. I saw the mask fall for a second and show her true face, greed, pure greed. She asked me if I wanted her to help me with the paperwork, that she knew a very good lawyer, that we could do everything quickly, that in a week the property would be in her name and I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. I told her I would think about it, that I needed a little more time, that I wanted to be sure. I saw frustration cross her face again, but this time she didn't hide it as fast. This time it lasted a little longer, and then she said something that confirmed everything for me, something that gave me the final strength I needed to go through with my plan. She told me I was being selfish, that I was holding on to material things, that at my age I should already be thinking about leaving things settled for my children, that they deserved to have security, that I had already lived my life and now it was their turn, that if I truly loved them, I would give them what they needed without making them beg. Selfish. She called me selfish. Me, who had given every piece of my life for them. Me, who had left myself with nothing so they could have everything. Me, who was still sacrificing myself even now when there was nothing left to sacrifice. And she called me selfish because I didn't want to give her the property I had bought with my own money. The property I had paid for with 40 years of work. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded. I told her she was right, that I was going to think about it seriously, that probably in a few weeks I would make a decision. I saw her smile again. That victory smile. That smile that said she had won, that I had fallen into her trap once more. We finished dinner. She paid the bill. She gave me a hug at the restaurant door. She told me she loved me, and I told her the same. But while I watched her drive away in her new car, that car that cost $50,000 and that, according to her, they had bought with their savings, that car that in reality they had bought with the money they stole from an elderly woman she cared for 2 years ago. Yes, the investigator had discovered that too. While I watched her drive away, I could only think one thing. You dug your own grave, Caroline, and I am going to bury you in it. That night I got home to my apartment and called my lawyer. I told him I wanted to accelerate everything, to prepare all the legal documents, to armor plate all my properties, to make sure that none of my children could touch a single dollar of what was mine without my express authorization. He told me it was going to cost about $3,000 to do everything right. I told him it didn't matter, to do it. I also called the investigator. I asked him to intensify the surveillance, to record every conversation he could, to document every suspicious movement, to be ready because soon we were going to need all that information. He told me he would charge me $500 more for the extra work. I told him perfect, to go ahead. I spent almost $4,000 in 2 phone calls. $4,000 that hurt because I wasn't rich. Because every dollar I spent was a dollar I had saved with effort. But I didn't care. Because those $4,000 were an investment in justice, an investment in dignity, an investment in recovering my life. The next few days were strange. Caroline called me every 2 days, always with some excuse, always asking about the property, always subtly pressuring. And I kept playing the game. I kept saying I was thinking about it, that I was almost ready to make a decision, that I just needed a little more time. And meanwhile, my lawyer was working, the investigator was working, and I was gathering every piece of evidence, every text, every email, every recorded conversation, every fake document, every lie. Everything was being recorded. Everything was being saved. Everything waiting for the perfect moment to come to light. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Monday morning. The investigator called me early. He sounded urgent. He told me that Caroline and Christopher had met the day before with a different lawyer, a lawyer specializing in mental incompetency cases. He told me they had been asking how to declare someone legally incompetent, what documents they needed, how long the process took, how much it cost. My blood ran cold. One thing was stealing documents. Another very different thing was planning to declare me crazy. That meant they wanted to take everything from me, not just the property. They wanted to take my freedom, my autonomy, my right to decide about my own life. They wanted to lock me up somewhere. They wanted to make me disappear. I asked the investigator if he had recorded that conversation. He told me yes, that he had everything. I told him to send me the recordings immediately, that I needed to hear them with my own ears. The recordings arrived in my email that same afternoon. I sat in front of the computer with my hands shaking. I put on headphones. I closed my eyes, and I pressed play. Caroline's voice was the first one I heard. That voice I had known since she was born. That voice that had called me Mom thousands of times. That voice that now spoke of me as if I were a problem to be solved, as if I were trash that needed to be thrown out. She was explaining to the lawyer that her mother, me, Eleanor Vance, was showing signs of dementia, that she forgot things, that she got confused, that she could no longer make important decisions, that they needed legal help to protect me from myself, to ensure I didn't spend all the money, to guarantee the property remained in good hands. Lies, all lies. I didn't forget anything. I wasn't confused. My mind was clearer than ever. But she was building a narrative. She was preparing the ground. She was building the case to take everything from me. Then I heard Christopher's voice. My son. The boy I carried in my womb for 9 months. The boy I nursed. The boy who needed me every day of his life until he turned 18. That boy was now talking about how much money they could save if they declared me incompetent quickly. He was saying that the longer they waited, the more money I could spend. That they had to act before I did something stupid like donating the money or giving it away. The lawyer explained the process to them. They needed medical evaluations. They needed witnesses to confirm my supposed incapacity. They needed to document every strange behavior, every lapse, every confusion, and then they could go to a judge. They could ask for a legal guardian to be assigned to me. And that guardian, of course, would be Caroline. She asked how much the whole process would cost. The lawyer said between $5,000 and $8,000. Christopher whistled. He said that was a lot of money, but Caroline cut him off. She said it didn't matter, that once they had control of her mother's properties, they would recover that investment in a week, that the estate alone was worth more than $200,000, that the savings I had totaled another $100,000. That in total there was more than $300,000 waiting. $300,000. That's how they saw me, like a bank account, like a property to liquidate. Not like a person, not like their mother, like money, just money. The recording continued for 15 more minutes. Them asking details. The lawyer explaining options. Everyone talking about me as if I were already dead, as if I no longer existed, as if my life wasn't worth anything more than what they could get out of it. When the recording ended, I took off the headphones. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. There was only ice. Cold, hard ice where before there had been a heart that loved unconditionally. I got up. I went to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My hands were steady, sure, determined, because now there were no more doubts. Now there was no more room for forgiveness. Now there was no turning back. I called my lawyer. I told him about the recording. I asked him what we could do. He told me we had a solid case. that attempting to declare someone incompetent with false evidence was a crime, that we could report them, that we could destroy them legally. But I told him no, that not yet, that I wanted something more than legal justice. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to know what it feels like when the people you love betray you. I wanted them to live with that shame for the rest of their lives. The lawyer fell silent for a moment. Then he asked me what I had in mind. I told him I needed time to think, that I would call him soon, that in the meantime he should keep preparing all the legal documents, to armor plate everything, to ensure not a single piece of paper could be used against me. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed awake in the darkness thinking, planning, fitting every piece of the puzzle, and slowly a plan began to form in my mind. A perfect plan, a plan that would give them exactly what they deserved. The idea came like a lightning bolt at 4 a.m. Christmas. They wanted to use Christmas to celebrate my death while I was still alive. They wanted to meet on my property, eat my food, enjoy what I had built, while they planned to lock me up and steal everything from me. Perfect. Then I would use Christmas to show them who I really was. I would use Christmas to reveal the truth. I would use Christmas to collect for every tear they had made me shed. I got up at dawn. I made coffee. I sat down with a notebook and began to write. Every step, every detail, every moment that had to happen for the plan to work. I wrote for 3 hours straight. And when I finished, I had a complete plan. A flawless plan. A plan that would serve justice. The first step was easy. I had to keep pretending. I had to keep being the naive mother, the confused old woman they thought I was. I had to give them confidence, make them feel they had won, that I had fallen into their trap. I called Caroline that same morning. I told her I had made a decision about the property. I heard her breathing speed up. I told her she was right, that it was too much for me, that I wanted to do things right, that I wanted to make sure everything was left in good hands. She almost screamed with happiness. She told me I had made the right decision, that she was going to take care of everything, that I didn't have to worry about a thing, that we were going to spend Christmas all together at the estate, that she was going to throw a special celebration, a family celebration. I told her that sounded perfect, that I would bring food, that I would prepare everything with love, that I wanted it to be an unforgettable Christmas. And I didn't lie. It was going to be unforgettable, but not for the reasons she imagined. The next few days I worked like I had never worked before. I hired a private security firm. I paid them $2,000 to install hidden cameras all over the property. Cameras with audio. Cameras that would record everything, every word, every movement, every moment. I also hired a notary public. I paid him $500 to be available on Christmas Day. I explained that I was going to need his services, that he would have to certify certain documents, that everything had to be legal and official. Then I went to the bank. I transferred all my money to a new account, an account only I could touch, an account not even my lawyer knew about. I put the papers in a safe I installed in my apartment. No one was going to touch that money, ever. I also went to see my doctor. I explained the situation. I showed him the recordings. I told him about my children's plan to declare me incompetent. I asked him to run every necessary test on me. Cognitive exams, memory exams, neurological exams, everything. The doctor ran tests on me for 2 full days, and the results were perfect. My mind was completely healthy. There were no signs of dementia, no confusion. There was nothing that could be used against me. The doctor handed me a certified medical report, an official document proving I was in perfect mental health. I paid him $300 for the consultations and the tests, and I guarded that paper as if it were gold, because that paper was my shield. It was my protection. It was the proof that everything my children were going to say about me was a lie. While I was doing all this, I kept talking to Caroline as if nothing was wrong. I called her every 2 days. I asked her about the plans for Christmas. I told her I was excited, that I couldn't wait for us all to be together, and she played along. She spoke to me with that sweet voice. She told me she loved me. She promised me everything was going to be perfect. Liar. Every word that came out of her mouth was a lie. But I was lying too now, and my lie was bigger. My lie was more elaborate. My lie was going to destroy them. A week before Christmas, I called the private investigator. I gave him final instructions. I told him that on December 24th, he had to be at the estate, hidden, with professional cameras, recording everything from the outside. I paid him an additional $1,000. He said he would be there, that he wouldn't fail me. I also called my lawyer. I explained the full plan. He stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he asked me if I was sure, if I really wanted to do this. I told him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. He told me he would be available that day, that he would have his phone on the whole time, that if I needed anything, to call him immediately. I thanked him. I told him this wasn't just revenge. It was justice. It was dignity. It was taking back my life. 5 days before Christmas, I started cooking. I made all the food they loved: roast turkey, stuffing, eggnog, sweet bread, chocolate cake. I worked day and night. I filled my refrigerator with enough food for 20 people, all prepared with care, with dedication, with love, fake love, like the love they had given me for years. 2 days before Christmas, I loaded my car with all the food I had prepared. Boxes and boxes of containers, everything perfectly packed, everything ready to take to the estate. But I wasn't going to take any of that. That food was going to stay in my apartment's refrigerator. It was going to rot there. Because I already knew I wasn't going to enter that property on Christmas Day. I already knew what they had planned. The investigator had sent me more information, more recordings. Caroline had told Christopher that on that day they were going to lock the gates with new padlocks, that they were going to change all the locks, that when I arrived they weren't going to let me in, that they were going to celebrate without me, that it was the perfect way to show me I was no longer part of the family. And after humiliating me publicly, they were going to proceed with the legal papers. They were going to use that moment as evidence. They were going to say I had arrived confused, that I had insisted on entering when no one had invited me, that I was losing my mind, that I needed urgent help. It was a perfect plan. If I had been the woman they thought I was, but I wasn't that woman, not anymore. On the morning of December 23rd, I woke up early. I dressed in comfortable clothes, dark pants, gray sweater, shoes I could wear for hours without getting tired. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman of 67, white hair, deep wrinkles, tired eyes. But those eyes weren't dead anymore. Those eyes had fire again. They had purpose. I ate breakfast slowly. Toast with coffee. I checked my purse for the 10th time. I had everything I needed. Copies of all the documents, the medical report, the recordings on a USB drive, the notary papers, my phone fully charged. Everything perfect. I called the investigator. I confirmed he would be in position the next day. He told me not to worry, that he had been doing this for 20 years, that he never failed. I told him I trusted him, that this was the most important thing I had done in my life. I also called my lawyer. I gave him the last instructions. I told him exactly what time he needed to be ready, what time I was going to need him to make the calls. I explained every step with precision. He took notes. He told me everything was clear, that he would be waiting for my signal. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I called my sister, Margaret. Margaret, who lived in another city. Margaret, who I didn't see often. Margaret, who was the only person in my family who still spoke to me with true affection. I told her everything, from the beginning to that moment. Every betrayal, every lie, every plan my children had hatched against me. She cried. She cried so much I had to ask her to calm down. She told me she couldn't believe what she was hearing, how it was possible that Caroline and Christopher were capable of that. I told her that people change, that money changes people. That greed is a disease that doesn't forgive. Margaret asked me what I was going to do. I explained my plan. She stayed quiet for a long minute. Then she told me something I will never forget. She told me I was the strongest woman she knew, that I always had been, that I had just forgotten that for a while, but that now I was back, that the true Eleanor had returned. I asked her to be a witness, to travel to the city, to be present the next day. She said yes without hesitating. She told me she was going to take the first bus in the morning, that she would be there at 2 in the afternoon. I gave her the address of a coffee shop near the estate. I told her I would wait for her there, that afterwards we would go together to do what had to be done. That night, I almost didn't sleep. Not from fear, not from doubt, but from anticipation. For years I had been the woman who stayed silent, the woman who accepted everything, the woman who forgave without being asked for forgiveness. But tomorrow was going to be different. Tomorrow I was going to speak. Tomorrow I was going to act. Tomorrow I was going to collect. I got up at 6 in the morning on December 24th. I showered calmly. I dressed in the same clothes from the day before. Nothing flashy, nothing special, just a normal older woman. No one was going to see me coming. No one was going to suspect anything. I ate breakfast looking out the window. The city was still quiet. It was early. The streets empty. The sky gray. A perfect day for what was coming. A day they would remember for the rest of their lives. At 7, I left my apartment. I walked to my car. An old car, 10 years old, that still ran perfectly. I didn't need anything luxurious. I didn't need to impress anyone. I just needed it to take me from one place to another, and that car did it well. I drove for an hour until I reached the coffee shop where I had arranged to see Margaret. I arrived at 8. The shop had just opened. I went in. I ordered a black coffee. I sat by the window. I took out my phone. I checked the messages. Caroline had texted me at 6 in the morning. It said she was excited to see us, that everything was ready at the estate, that they expected us at 4 in the afternoon. Not to be late. Liar until the end. I replied. I told her I would be there, that I was bringing a lot of food, that I had prepared everything with love, that I couldn't wait to hug them all. More lies. I knew how to play that game now, too. Christopher texted me, too. A short message. Cold. Said, "See you this afternoon, Mom." He didn't even make an effort to sound affectionate. He didn't even pretend well anymore, because he believed he had won. That I was so dumb I didn't realize anything. At 10, the investigator arrived. He entered the coffee shop. He sat across from me. He was a tall man, about 55, gray hair, serious face. He showed me his equipment, small but professional cameras, directional microphones, everything hidden in a common backpack. No one would suspect anything. I explained exactly where he had to position himself. There was a large tree about 50 yards from the main gate. From there, he could see everything. He could record everything without being seen. He told me perfect, that at 3 in the afternoon he would be in position, that he wouldn't fail me. I gave him an envelope with $500 more, extra money for the day's work. He told me it wasn't necessary. I told him it was, that he was an essential part of the plan, that without him none of this would work. He took the envelope, shook my hand, wished me luck. I told him I didn't need luck. I just needed him to record everything. He left the coffee shop at 11. I stayed there, ordering more coffee, waiting. The hours passed slowly. Every minute was an eternity. But I wasn't in a rush. I knew everything had to happen at the exact moment, neither before nor after. At 2 in the afternoon, Margaret arrived. I saw her get out of the taxi. She was carrying a small bag, simple clothes. She looked tired from the trip, but her eyes were shining. She entered the shop. She saw me. She walked quickly toward me. We hugged. And in that hug, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt that someone was on my side, that I wasn't alone, that I had a true ally. We sat down. I asked her to eat something. She said she wasn't hungry. She just wanted to know what we were going to do. I explained everything again, every step, every detail. She listened in silence, nodding, taking it all in. When I finished, she asked me if I was ready. I told her I had been ready for weeks, that this wasn't impulsive. This was calculated justice. At 3:30, we left the coffee shop. We got into my car. I drove slowly toward the estate. There was no rush. There was still time. We arrived at 3:50. 10 minutes before the agreed time, I parked far from the main gate. Where they couldn't see my car, Margaret stayed in the car. I walked alone toward the gate. The investigator was already in position. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there, recording, documenting, being a silent witness to what was about to happen. I breathed deep. I looked at the closed gate. I looked at the new chains. I looked at the shiny padlocks. And I smiled. Because they didn't know that I already knew everything, that I had already seen this coming, that I already had my answer ready. I walked toward the gate, my steps firm, my head high. I wasn't the scared woman anymore. I wasn't the pleading mother. I was Eleanor Vance, and I was coming to collect. I knocked on the gate. I waited. No one came. I knocked harder. Nothing. I shouted. I called Caroline. I called Christopher. Silence. I could only hear the laughter inside, the happy voices, the music, the celebration happening without me. Then I saw it, the folded paper, tucked between the bars. I took it. I opened it. I read the words, "Go home. We don't want you here." And in that moment, all the pain of months turned into pure ice. I took out my phone. I dialed my lawyer's number. He answered on the first ring. I told him 2 words. "It's done," and he knew exactly what to do. My lawyer told me to wait, not to move from there, that in 30 minutes everything would start. I told him I would be waiting, that I had all the time in the world. I hung up. I put the phone in my purse, and I stayed standing in front of the closed gate, looking inside. I could see them through the gaps between the bars. Caroline was serving punch in disposable cups. She was wearing a bright green dress. New. Expensive. Probably paid for with the money she planned to steal from me soon. She was smiling while she talked to her husband, a man I had never liked, a man who always looked at me as if I were an old piece of furniture someone had forgotten to throw out. Christopher was by the grill, flipping burgers, laughing at something someone had just said. My son. The same one who, when he was 5, used to cry every time I left the house. The same one who told me I was the best mom in the world. The same one who was now talking to lawyers about how to declare me crazy to steal everything from me. The grandkids were running through the yard, chasing each other between the tables, screaming happily, innocent. They didn't know anything. They weren't to blame. But they were going to see what their parents really were. They were going to learn a lesson they would never forget. That betrayal always has a price. That the lie always comes to light. I saw other relatives too. Cousins, sisters-in-law, people I had invited to my house 1,000 times. People who had eaten at my table. People who had received my help when they needed it. And now everyone was there. On my property, celebrating my exclusion, laughing at my absence. I took out my phone again. I opened the camera. I took photographs of the closed gate, of the chains, of the padlocks, of the paper with the cruel message. I took a video, too. I recorded my voice explaining the date, the time, what I was seeing, everything documented, everything saved as evidence. Then I heard a car approaching. I turned around. It was Margaret. She had moved my car closer. She got out and walked toward me. Her face showed rage, a rage I had never seen in her before. She hugged me without saying anything. And in that hug, I felt her support. I felt her strength. I felt that no matter what happened, I wasn't alone. I showed her the paper. She read the words. Her eyes filled with tears, tears of rage. She asked me how it was possible, how they could be so cruel. I told her that money does horrible things to people, that it turns children into enemies, that it transforms love into greed. I looked at my watch. 15 minutes had passed since I called my lawyer. Another 15 to go until everything started. 15 minutes where I just stood there, looking at them, watching them, recording every moment in my memory. I saw when Caroline approached the gate. She didn't know I was there yet. She came walking with a cousin. They were speaking in low voices, but I could hear. The cousin asked her if I had called, if I had asked why they wouldn't let me in. Caroline laughed, a cold laugh. She said I was probably crying in my apartment, that I was surely calling all the relatives looking for sympathy, that I was pathetic. Pathetic. She called me pathetic. Her own mother, the woman who birthed her, The woman who stayed up 1,000 nights taking care of her when she was sick. The woman who worked double shifts for years to pay for her college. That woman was pathetic to her. Then Caroline saw me. She froze. Her face changed. For a second I saw fear. But then the mask returned. That fake smile. She approached the gate. She asked me what I was doing there. I told her I had come as we agreed, that I brought food, that I was ready to celebrate with the family. She shook her head. She told me there was a misunderstanding, that the celebration was private, that I wasn't invited, that I should go back home. I asked her why. Why was she doing this to me? What had I done to deserve this humiliation? She shrugged. She told me I didn't fit in the family anymore, that my values were different, that they needed space, that I had to understand that things change, that children grow up, that mothers have to learn to let go. Let go. What a convenient word. Let go for them meant disappear. It meant letting them take everything that was mine without a fight. It meant dying quietly and grateful that they had given me a few years of fake attention. I asked her about the estate. Why had they changed the locks? Why had they put padlocks on my own property? She blinked, surprised that I knew that. She told me it was for safety, that there had been robberies in the area, that they had decided to protect the property better. Lies. Until the end she kept lying, but her face betrayed her. I could see the guilt hidden behind the arrogance. I could see the fear that I knew more than I was showing, and she was right to be afraid. Christopher approached too. He saw me, and his face went hard. He asked me what I wanted. I told him I wanted to enter, that this was my property, that I had a right to be there. He laughed. He told me the property soon wouldn't be mine, that they were going to take care of that I was already too old to manage these things, that it was better that I gave up and gave them everything voluntarily. Margaret took a step forward. She asked them how they dared, how they could do this to their own mother. Caroline looked at her with contempt. She told her this wasn't her problem, to mind her own business, that she didn't know the full situation. Margaret told them she knew enough, that she knew they were traitors, thieves, people without heart or conscience. Christopher raised his voice. He told her to shut up, that she didn't know what she was talking about, that his mother was losing her mind, that she needed help, that they just wanted to protect her. Protect me. What hypocrites! They didn't want to protect me. They wanted to eliminate me. They wanted to erase me from their lives but keep everything I had built. They wanted my money without having to deal with my presence. I looked at my watch again. 25 minutes had passed. 5 left. 5 minutes for everything to change. 5 minutes for them to discover they had underestimated the wrong woman. Caroline was telling me something. To leave. To stop making a scene. That I was embarrassing myself. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was looking toward the road, waiting. And then I saw them. 2 cars approaching. A black car and a white car, driving slowly down the dirt road that led to the estate. My heart started beating faster, not from fear, from anticipation, from justice finally arriving. Caroline followed my gaze. She saw the cars. She frowned. She asked who they were. I told her she would know soon, that very soon everything was going to become clear. The cars stopped in front of the gate. From the black car, 2 people got out. My lawyer and the notary I had hired. From the white car, 3 people got out. 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective. Caroline's face lost all color. Christopher took a step back. They asked what was happening, what this meant. I told them it was the moment of truth, the moment when everything was going to be revealed. My lawyer approached the gate. He introduced himself. He stated his full name. He said he represented Mrs. Eleanor Vance, that he was coming to enforce certain legal rights, that they needed to open the gate immediately. Caroline refused. She said this was private property, that they had no right to enter. My lawyer smiled. He took some papers out of his briefcase. He showed her the property deed. He showed her that the estate was still in my name, that I was the only legal owner, that they were the ones who had no right to be there without my permission. Christopher tried to argue. He said I had given them permission, that I had organized the reunion. My lawyer asked him to show proof of that, a text, an email, something confirming I had invited them. Christopher stammered. He had nothing. Because I had never invited them. They had organized everything behind my back. The police officer stepped forward. He said he had received a complaint. A complaint of trespassing on private property, of unauthorized changing of locks, of intimidation of the rightful owner. He asked who was responsible for those padlocks. No one answered. Everyone looked at each other. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable. The other relatives had approached the gate, watching the scene without understanding what was happening. The kids had stopped playing. Everyone was attentive. The officer repeated the question, louder this time. Who put those padlocks on? Who changed the locks? Who denied entry to Mrs. Vance on her own property? Caroline finally spoke. She said she had done it, that she had her reasons, that her mother wasn't well, that she needed protection. The officer asked for documents proving that, some medical order, some legal declaration of incapacity, some paper giving her authority to make those decisions. Caroline had nothing, only excuses, only lies that crumbled under the weight of the truth. My lawyer spoke again. He said he had evidence of a systematic plan to strip his client of her properties, that he had recordings, documents, testimonies, that everything was ready to be presented before a judge if necessary. The lawyer opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder. He held it up so everyone could see it. He said everything was in there, every lie, every plan, every conversation where my children had conspired against me, and now it was time for everyone to know. Caroline tried to interrupt. She raised her voice. She said that was private, that he had no right to show anything. My lawyer looked at her steadily. He told her that when you plan to commit fraud against your own mother, you lose the right to privacy. That when you try to steal properties and declare someone incompetent with lies, your actions become a legal matter. He took out the first recording. He asked the police officer for permission to play it. The officer nodded. My lawyer connected a portable speaker to his phone. He turned up the volume, and he pressed play. Caroline's voice filled the air. That recording of the meeting with the mental incompetency lawyer. Everyone heard how she described her mother as a confused woman, as someone who could no longer make decisions, as someone who needed to be controlled. And everyone heard when she talked about the money, about the $300,000 they wanted to control. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Everyone looked at Caroline. She was pale as a sheet. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her husband took a step back away from her, as if her guilt were contagious. Then came Christopher's voice on the recording, talking about accelerating the process, about not wasting time, about making sure to take everything before I could spend the money, talking about his own mother as if she were a bank account with legs. I saw how Christopher's wife looked at him. I saw the shame on her face. Maybe she didn't know everything. Maybe he had lied to her too. Maybe she believed they really cared about my well-being. But now she knew the truth. Now everyone knew the truth. My lawyer stopped the recording. He took out other documents. The fake documents Caroline had prepared. The property transfer forms I found in my office. He showed them one by one. He explained how they had entered my house without permission, how they had prepared everything to rob me legally, how they had planned every detail thinking I would never notice. One of the cousins spoke up. He asked if that was true. If Caroline and Christopher had really planned all that. He looked at them, waiting for them to deny it, waiting for there to be an explanation. But there wasn't one. There was only silence. There were only guilty faces. There was only painful truth floating in the air like toxic smoke. The notary stepped forward. He said he had certified several documents that very morning, documents proving Mrs. Eleanor Vance's perfect mental state. He took out the medical report, the report my doctor had prepared after all the tests. He read it out loud. Every perfect result, every test passed, every evaluation showing a woman of clear and capable mind. Caroline finally found her voice. She screamed that it was all a lie, that I had deceived them, that I had manipulated the doctors, that this was a trap, a conspiracy against them. Margaret laughed, a bitter laugh. She asked her who was conspiring against whom, who had changed the locks, who had prepared fake documents, who had planned to rob their own mother. Christopher tried to defend himself. He said they just wanted to protect me, that I was acting strange lately, that they were afraid someone would take advantage of me. My lawyer asked him why then had they never taken me to a doctor? Why had they never spoken to me openly? Why their first move was to contact a lawyer to strip me of my rights instead of seeking real medical help? He had no answer. Because there was no answer, that wasn't the truth. The truth that they didn't care about me. They only cared about what they could get out of me. The other relatives started to murmur. I heard snippets of conversations, words like shame, betrayal, greed. The cousins were backing away from Caroline and Christopher. The aunts were shaking their heads. The brothers-in-law looked at the ground. No one wanted to be close to them now. No one wanted to be associated with what they had done. The grandchildren looked at their parents with confusion. Caroline's oldest son asked what was happening. Why was Grandma outside? Why were there police? Caroline didn't answer him. She couldn't. She didn't have words to explain to her son that she had tried to rob her own mother. The police officer spoke again. He said he had enough information to proceed with a formal investigation. That attempted fraud was a serious crime. That changing locks on someone else's property was trespassing. That the evidence was clear and overwhelming. He asked Caroline if she wanted to say anything before he took her official statement. She looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears now. She wasn't the arrogant woman from a few minutes ago anymore. She was a scared child who had just been caught. She begged me with her look, waiting for me to save her, waiting for me to do what I had always done. Forgive, forget, let it slide. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I held her gaze without blinking, without emotion, cold as the ice that had grown in my chest for months. And I said nothing. My silence was my answer. My silence was her sentence. My lawyer continued. He took out more papers. Copies of text messages between Caroline and Christopher. Messages where they talked about me as a burden, where they discussed how long the legal process would take, where they celebrated every little advance in their plan. He read them out loud. Every word like a stab wound. Not for me, for them. Because every word revealed who they really were. He also showed the photographs the investigator had taken. Photographs of Caroline meeting with the lawyer. Photographs of Christopher at the bank, asking questions about my accounts. Photographs of the two together, reviewing documents in a coffee shop. Everything documented. Everything with date and time. Everything irrefutable. One of the aunts started to cry. She said she couldn't believe what she was seeing. That she had known Caroline since she was a baby. That she never imagined she would be capable of something like that. Other people nodded. The shock on their faces was genuine. Because one thing is knowing bad people exist in the world. Another very different thing is discovering those people are in your own family. Caroline's husband finally spoke. He told her this was too much, that he hadn't signed up for this, that she had told him her mother agreed, that everything was legal. Caroline looked at him with rage. She screamed at him to shut up, that he knew perfectly well what they were doing, that he couldn't play innocent now, and there it was. Another crack in their perfect facade, another truth coming to light. Her own husband trying to jump off the sinking ship. The rats are always the first to flee. My lawyer put the documents away. He told the officer everything was available for the investigation, that he had copies of everything, that he was ready to file formal charges if my client decided to proceed. The officer took notes. He asked for Caroline and Christopher's full names, their addresses, their phone numbers. Everything was recorded. Then my lawyer looked at me. He asked if I wanted to add anything, if I wanted to speak. I told him yes, that I had something to say. I moved closer to the gate. I looked at everyone on the other side. My family. The people who were supposed to love me. The people who had shared my table 1,000 times. And I spoke. I told them I had worked my whole life. That I had sacrificed everything for my children. That every dollar I had earned with my sweat, with my hands, with my effort. That no one had given me anything. That I had built everything from zero. I told them that when I bought the estate 20 years ago, I did it thinking of them, of having a place where the family could gather, where the grandkids could play, where we could make happy memories. that every tree I planted dreaming of seeing them grow under its shade. I told them I never imagined that love would be returned with betrayal, that I never thought my own children would see me as an obstacle, as something to remove from the path, as money with legs. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I spoke clearly and firmly, because there was no pain anymore. There was only clarity. There was only truth. There was only justice finally finding its way. I told them they had chosen this path, that they had decided to break our family, that they had preferred money over love, and that now they had to live with those decisions. They had to live knowing they betrayed the woman who gave them life, who gave them everything, who never denied them anything. I looked directly at Caroline. I told her she had been my pride, my first daughter, the girl who made me a mother, and that seeing her become this broke my heart in ways she would never understand, until she had children of her own. And those children did the same to her as she did to me. My lawyer took a step forward. He took the last document out of his briefcase. This one was different, thicker, with official seals. He looked at me asking for confirmation. I nodded. It was the moment of the final blow, the moment that would change everything forever. He held the document up for everyone to see. He said it was a court order issued that same morning, an order freezing any attempt at property transfer, that invalidated any document signed under pressure or deceit, that protected all of Mrs. Eleanor Vance's assets from any fraudulent claim. But there was more. Much more. He took out another paper. This was my will. My new will. The one I had made 3 weeks ago. The one none of them knew about. He opened it. He began to read. In this will, I made my wishes clear. The estate would no longer be for Caroline or Christopher. It had been transferred to a family trust, a trust that would benefit my grandchildren when they turned 25. But their parents would not have access. Never. Not a dollar. Not an inch of land. The savings I had, the $100,000 they coveted, would be donated to organizations that helped elderly victims of family abuse. Every penny would go to protect other mothers, other grandmothers, other women suffering what I had suffered. The house in the city where I lived, that too had a new destiny. It would be sold, and the money from that sale would go to pay for my grandchildren's college. Education their parents couldn't touch, couldn't use, couldn't steal. I saw Caroline's face crumble as she listened. I saw Christopher clench his fists. They had lost. They had lost everything. Not by the law, not by the police, but by their own actions, by their own greed, by their own betrayal. My lawyer continued. He said he had also filed a civil lawsuit, a lawsuit for emotional damages, for attempted fraud, for defamation in trying to declare me incompetent without medical basis. The numbers he mentioned made several relatives gasp. $50,000 in damages, plus legal costs, plus fines for trespassing. Christopher exploded. He shouted that was ridiculous, that I couldn't do that to them, that they were my children, that they had rights. My lawyer looked at him calmly. He told him children have rights when they act like children, when they respect, when they love, when they care, but when they betray, when they steal, when they lie, they lose those rights. They lose everything. The police officer intervened. He said he needed them to open the gate immediately, that Mrs. Vance had a legal right to enter her property, that if they refused it would be considered contempt and could result in immediate arrest. Caroline fumbled for the keys with shaking hands. She dropped them twice before she could open the padlocks. The chains fell to the ground with a metallic clatter. The gate opened slowly, and I crossed the threshold, but not to celebrate, not to reunite with them, just to do one thing, one last thing. I walked straight to where the tables were, the tables I had ordered prepared, that I had paid for. I stood in the middle of everyone. The relatives cleared a path for me. No one looked me in the eye. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard. Everyone had seen the truth. I took out my phone. I took pictures of everything. Of the food they had bought with money they planned to steal from me. Of the decorations. Of the guilty faces. Everything documented. Everything saved. Then I spoke one last time. I told them they would never step foot on this property again, that they would never receive another dollar from me, that they would never hear my voice calling to see how they were, that they had killed their mother the day they decided to betray her, and that now they would have to live with that corpse on their conscience. I told them I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But that forgiving didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean allowing. It didn't mean letting them get away with it. It meant I would no longer carry the weight of their betrayal. They would carry it. Forever. I looked at my grandchildren, the kids I loved. I told them that when they were older they would understand, that when they read the documents, when they saw the proof, when they knew the whole story, they would understand their grandmother didn't abandon them, that it was their parents who destroyed this family, and that she only protected herself, only collected what was owed, only asked for justice. I turned around. I walked toward the gate. Margaret was waiting for me there. My lawyer, too. The notary, the police, the people who really supported me, the people who really saw me. I walked out of that property with my head held high, with my dignity intact, with my soul finally free. Behind me I heard sobbing, shouting, Caroline calling me, begging, saying we could fix this, that we should talk, that she was sorry, but her words were lost in the wind. Because I wasn't listening anymore. I didn't care about her excuses anymore. I had already closed that door, forever. I got into the car with Margaret. The lawyer and notary left in their vehicle. The police stayed to take final statements and ensure no one tried anything desperate. I started the engine. I looked one last time toward that property, toward those trees I planted with my hands, toward that house I built with my effort, and I didn't feel sadness. I felt liberation. I drove back to the city in silence. Margaret respected my quiet. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to fill the void with empty words. She just put her hand on mine while I drove, and that simple gesture told me everything I needed to know, that I wasn't alone, that I would never be alone again. We arrived at my apartment when the sun was starting to set. The sky was painted in oranges and reds, a beautiful sunset, the kind of sunset that before would have made me think of family, of gatherings, of love. But now, I just saw beauty, pure beauty, without the weight of broken expectations. I made tea for both of us. We sat in the living room. Margaret asked me how I felt. I told her the truth, that I felt empty but not in a bad way. Empty like when you finish carrying something heavy for years and finally let go. Your arms feel strange, light, but free. That's how I felt, free. That night I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, not from regret, but because my mind was full of plans for myself. For the first time in decades, I was thinking about what I wanted, about what I needed, about who I wanted to be without the weight of being a mother first and a woman second. The next few days were a whirlwind. My phone didn't stop ringing. Numbers I didn't recognize, blocked numbers. I knew it was them, Caroline, Christopher, their husbands, relatives trying to mediate. But I didn't answer. I had said everything I had to say. There were no more words. Only consequences. My lawyer called me on the third day. He told me Caroline had hired her own lawyer, that they wanted to negotiate, that they were willing to admit their mistakes if I withdrew the lawsuits. I laughed, a bitter laugh. I told him there was nothing to negotiate, that the lawsuits would run their course, that justice isn't negotiated, it's served. He also informed me that several relatives had given statements, cousins who had heard suspicious conversations, aunts who had seen strange behaviors, everyone now wanting to clear their consciences, everyone now on the side of truth. Too late to change anything, but enough to sink Caroline and Christopher further. A week after the Christmas incident, I made a decision. I put my apartment up for sale. That city had nothing for me anymore. Only memories of a life that no longer existed. I needed to start over. Completely over. Margaret suggested I move near her. To her city. She said she had friends there. Good people. People who would appreciate my company without expecting anything in return. I thought about it for 2 days, and I said yes. For the first time in my life, I said yes to something just because I wanted it, not because someone else needed it. The apartment sold in 3 weeks. I sold it for $120,000. Money I immediately transferred to the trust account for my grandkids, money they would use for education, for opportunities, to build better lives than their parents. Lives without the stain of betrayal. I packed only the essentials: clothes, some books, old photographs from when my children were small and still looked at me with love. Those I kept not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. A reminder that love can die, that people change, that not everyone deserves your loyalty just because they share your blood. The day I left that city, I didn't look back. Margaret drove. I was in the passenger seat looking forward, toward the road, toward the future, toward a life that was barely beginning even though I was 67. We arrived in her city at sunset. She had gotten me a small apartment, a cozy place in a quiet building. When I walked in for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt home. Not because the place was special, but because it was mine. Just mine, without chains, without obligations, without ghosts of the past. The first months were an adjustment. I met the neighbors, older people like me. Some widowed, others divorced. All with stories, all with scars, but all still alive, still trying, still believing life had more to offer. I joined a book club, something I always wanted to do but never had time for because I was busy being a mother, being the one who solved problems, being the one who sacrificed her dreams for the dreams of others. Now I read 3 books a month. I discussed ideas. I made friends. I lived. I also started walking every morning. Through the park near my apartment, I watched the sunrise, listened to the birds, breathed fresh air, and every morning I gave thanks. Thanks for the strength I found, for the truth I discovered, for the life I reclaimed. 6 months after moving, I received a letter. It was from my oldest grandson, Liam, Caroline's son. He was 16. In the letter, he told me he had read all the documents, that his mother had shown them to him, trying to justify herself, but that he had seen the truth. He had seen the recordings. He had read the messages. He had understood everything. He asked for my forgiveness for not doing anything that Christmas Day. He said he didn't understand what was happening, that now he did understand, that he was ashamed of his parents, that he wanted to see me, that he wanted to know the real grandma, not the version his parents had painted. I wept reading that letter. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. Because that boy had seen beyond the lies. He had chosen the truth. He had chosen real love over blind loyalty. I replied to him. I told him I loved him, that I had always loved him, that when he turned 18 and could make his own decisions, I would be waiting for him, that we would have all the time in the world to get to know each other for real, to build a relationship based on honesty, on respect, on genuine love. A year passed, then 2. My life filled with simple but meaningful things: short trips with Margaret, afternoons of tea with my new friends, books that made me think, movies that made me feel, days without drama, without betrayal, without pain. Caroline tried to contact me several times during those years, through third parties, through letters. Once she even showed up in Margaret's city looking for me, but I didn't receive her. Not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. She had made her decisions. I had made mine, and our paths didn't cross anymore. The civil lawsuit ran its course. We won. Of course we won. The evidence was irrefutable. Caroline and Christopher were ordered to pay $60,000 in damages. Money they would probably never see in full, but that would remain on their record. It would remain as a reminder, as a permanent scar of what they did. That money also went to the trust. Every cent used to ensure my grandchildren had a future their parents couldn't ruin, a future built on the justice I had fought to get. Today I am 70 years old. 3 years have passed since that Christmas. 3 years since I locked that gate and opened the door to my own life. And I can say with absolute certainty that they were the best 3 years of my existence. I am no longer Eleanor, the sacrificed mother. I am no longer Eleanor, the silent victim. I am no longer Eleanor, the woman who forgave everything for crumbs of love. Now I am simply Eleanor, Eleanor Vance. A woman who learned that self-love isn't selfishness, that boundaries aren't cruelty, that justice isn't revenge, it is dignity. My name is no longer tied to theirs. My story is no longer about what they did to me. It is about what I did, about how I stood up, about how I collected, about how I lived. My name is no longer theirs. My story is just beginning.